Tuesday, February 4th, 2020, to order with roll call, please.
Betts?
Yes.
Cavelli?
Yes.
McAlpine?
Here.
Kraus?
Here.
Weinhammer?
Here.
Collier?
Here. Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now move to the public comment section. Is there anybody here who would like to address the committee of the whole? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment at 6:17. We're going to start off with a discussion regarding amendment to our liquor license code. Chief?
Well, the chief is getting his slides set up. We had discussed this previously with the village board, some updates that we're recommending to the liquor code. We just talked more in conceptual framework options before. It sounded like the village board was generally in support of the framework that was being proposed by staff. We've now been able to put that here in a plan, and we have a red line document of what we are proposing for the changes to the liquor ordinance. So want to get any feedback from the village board tonight, whatever you have regarding these proposed changes. We are planning then too to send a letter out to all the bars, restaurants, whoever has a liquor license, to make them aware that we are contemplating changes, give them the opportunity to review those changes and provide feedback. We'd like to get that feedback here before we bring it back to the village board for final consideration. So turn it over to the chief. We'll go over these and happy to answer any questions that you have along the way.
And this is just a updated presentation from November 19th when we spoke about this initially. So what we're going to talk about is some changes in definitions, license changes, and there's a significant number of license changes, and there's anticipated uses that we don't have now, but we think we will in the future. So they're included in here. The license fees have changed in addition to the license structure. We're going to talk about endorsements, and then some regulatory item issues that we have identified either through the enforcement of building and zoning provisions or during our enforcement in regards to the liquor code and the hearing that we had, and we found some issues that we thought needed some shoring up as it related to the ordinance. So first we'll talk about definitions, and one of the definitions is endorsement, and that's just a supplementary license. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to that. And then the local liquor control commissioner is the mayor, and he's going to have the ability to do some more regulatory items in regards to the ability to request a licensee to conform to certain requirements of the village or have the ability to suspend that privilege. The licensee will have the ability to have a request for a hearing. That's the due process part of this. And that the liquor commissioner can also request or have the ability to submit requests for records from the licensees as well. This is a good time to talk about, there's video gaming cafe. That was another definition that we included. And Mr. Euler, village attorney, did identify an issue that we should address when it comes to video gaming cafes. Just to refresh your recollection, a video gaming cafe is a business that we don't allow in the village of Cary in regards to just having its emphasis on gaming versus the sale of liquor or food. So there was a provision or some language that Mr. Euler suggested that we say that certain classes of licenses cannot be used for video gaming cafes. So that'll be in there as well after review by our legal counsel. I thank you for that. So this is what I did here on this slide is try to illustrate what's changed, what has existed, and then what's been, both deleted and included or added. Anything in red is a license type that's been deleted from the liquor code. Anything in green, and although I don't have the uses here, I'll have it in another slide. We've added 2 uses. One is a license that allows the sale, or not the sale, the providing of alcoholic liquor, wine, or beer in the to complement a business. So if a salon or a jewelry store, both hairdresser, nail salon, if they wanted to provide alcoholic liquor to customers, they can't necessarily advertise that on the outside of their business, but they can do that under one of these. And then there's BYOB, which is bring your own alcoholic beverage. And that's another license class that we put in here in the anticipation that there might be a restaurant in the future that would take advantage of that. We've deleted 4 other license classes only because we felt that they were redundant. So most of those license classes were absorbed by the Class A license. So in essence, what we've done is we took away 4, added 2. And what this really did also is it's easier for our front office staff to manage or administer the licenses because we reduced the license types and their applications. So they're a little bit more straightforward. So this is what we have. Yes, ma'am.
Can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
Under Class K, $50 each and $250. What does that mean with the $250?
Well, that was, I used the old slide, and that would have been an endorsement for that, but that would be, on the next one, I believe it's just 50.
100.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
$100.
we changed that.
Okay.
But I was just trying to illustrate that these are the changes that we made.
Oh, okay.
So this is what the new licenses look like. We have A, which is basically a sale of alcoholic liquor for consumption on premise and not for resale. Class AV, which is the Class A license with video gaming. And you'll note that there's a difference in the fees. Class B, which is packaged goods. Class F is for not-for-profits, organizations, and churches, and there's a limit for those. There are seven days. This is a new one. Class G is that complimentary service of beer, wine, sparkling alcoholic beverages, incidental to the operation of the business. Now, when we started talking about this, we also started discussing there are certain businesses that we shouldn't allow to do this, and one of those businesses would be like those providing physical therapy, medical services, therapeutic services, things of that nature. So those will be specifically excluded from the ability to provide a complimentary service of alcoholic liquor to a patron in those type of businesses. Class H is a BYOB or corkage, and there's a associated fee for that. Class J is alcoholic liquor sales on and off-site, consumption of beer and wine. And then the Class JV is the same thing as the sale of alcoholic liquor with video gaming. Class K is special events specific to the Cary Park District or similar locations, which could include other governmental bodies. And then we have the endorsements, and the endorsements would be $250 a piece. You have to have a Class A, AB, J, or JV license, and those endorsements would be sampling, craft production, corkage, beer and wine gardens, and then catering. And the catering would be within the Village of Cary. We couldn't issue a license for catering outside the Village of Cary. That's just a reminder of how many licenses there are in the state in terms of types and things of that nature. We spoke about this in November. I just wanted to remind everyone that there are other licenses that our licensees have to obtain, and generally they have to get ours before they can obtain a state liquor license. Okay, so any questions up to this point? Because now we're going to talk about some items that we believe are necessary to be included in the code that would help us enforce some of the provisions of the liquor code. And one of them is that requiring Bassett, which has always been required right now. So any business that serves alcoholic liquor to a patron on premise has to be Bassett certified. They have 120 days from when the employee is employed to obtain that certification. Certifications are good for 3 years, but we expanded it to the licensee as well, because under the current provision, the licensee doesn't have to be Bassett certified. So it makes sense for them to have that certification as well. That kind of is dovetails into this is roster of personnel. Some businesses may not have as good record keeping as we would like in terms of the ability to determine when an employee begins and ends their employment with a particular business. So we're going to make this an annual requirement that they have to submit a roster of personnel of those individuals that serve alcoholic liquor to patrons on premise. So if they're selling packaged goods, they don't have to conform to this requirement. But this is more to relate to us being able to identify who needs to be have that Bassett certification. Annual report would be a requirement that would give us a percentage of sales of alcohol to other food items, just to identify the types of liquor licenses and if they're correctly obtaining the correct category of liquor license. Sanitary conditions, the only thing here is, I know that's an obvious, that you have to have a business that conforms to all the requirements related to sanitary conditions. But there's a change here from what you have in your packet related to the redlined version of the code, and that's because 190 was taken by a provision of the code that we just amended last January, and that would be the ability to appeal a decision from a hearing in front of the liquor commissioner to the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. So the only thing that changes there is the section number. Intoxication, everyone will understand that someone that's intoxicated at a .08, because that's the per se level for individuals driving vehicles. Bless you. But in regards to a situation where someone's not obligated to take that test, we have some behavioral-based descriptions so that if they're exhibiting these types of behaviors, we can prove in a hearing that they were intoxicated under our code. Unauthorized possession of alcoholic liquor by a patron, not related to, bring your own alcoholic beverages into a properly licensed premise, would be, we had a situation where somebody went and picked up a pint of vodka, they went into an establishment, they were ingesting that as well as a beverage in the establishment, and then they left and they were struck by a vehicle. When we did our investigation, we found that they purchased the alcohol or the liquor from a different establishment and they brought it in with them. So this would be a requirement or a restriction on the patron not to be able to bring the liquor into that establishment. They'd have to purchase their alcohol from the establishment, because then they can keep track of how much they've consumed in that business. Failure to conform to required state and village or requirements, state regulations, they have to pay their income tax, things of that nature. They have to pay for a liquor license. And then our village regulations, we have certain building codes, and this is another tool to gain compliance from those licensees that may be violating other provisions of the building code. We can suspend their liquor license to obtain their compliance with other village regulations.
That is a section that we will add to our tobacco ordinance as well. As many of the board members may know, we've had some challenges with one of our tobacco providers right now, and this was a suggestion by our village attorney to help reduce those conflicts.
And then to clearly identify who has the ability to enforce the provisions of the liquor code, and we've identified them as code enforcement officers, police officers, and anyone that's conferred the authority by the liquor commissioner, which is the village president, our mayor. We also, in the code, you'll see references throughout it for Appendix A. Appendix A looks like this in terms of it identifies all the fees that are required under this code, so that instead of going to each individual section, we would change these fees in one area, and that would be under Appendix A. So that's what this is, and it's just basically a summary of the fees that would be paid by somebody that would be involved in obtaining a license to serve alcoholic liquor or sell alcoholic liquor within the village. With that, that's my summary in regards to the changes that you've seen in the liquor code, and I'd be happy to answer any questions I could as it relates to those changes.
I have a question about the Bassett. The statute that says they have to be certified within 120 days, can we make it more restrictive than what is in there? So instead of
believe
it being
we can make it more
120 days,
restrictive.
less than that?
Well, if it's in the state liquor code,
At 120 days, it's.
I think it's probably going to be
Well, because you can do it
120 days.
online, so, I mean, it can be done pretty fast. And to have them get something like that done quicker, the Bassett certification, just to ensure that they're serving properly, I think would be beneficial for us.
All right, so I'm not sure, we'll give it a little thought. It is a provision that comes from the state law, so
I
take a
always thought
look
we
at
could
it.
be more restrictive.
You can generally, relative to liquor matters, not sure about that one, that specific timing for the training.
So 120 days is a long time,
It is.
you know, to obtain this certification. And it used to be that you had to go to a class, and it was a 4-hour class, and it was,
Right.
you know, in person, and now they do it online. And Trustee Cavelli's correct, it might take an hour, hour and a half tops to do it.
That's a good point. I took the training, and it doesn't take long at all, just to see what it involved. So, yes, it is pretty quick.
How much does it cost to take the test?
Like $15.
Yeah, like
I think.
$15.
It's very it's nominal.
Right.
It's a nominal amount, and that's why, you
30
know,
days should be reasonable.
yeah, to have that roster of personnel is important, because then the clock starts at that time in regards to the employment of that person and when they're required to have it. But the real issue is, when do they stop employment and start employment and things of that nature, because the issue that we ran into was the Liquor Control Commission indicated that the 120 days begins whenever they're a new employee. So if you were somebody that was inclined to maybe not want to have their employees certified, they could not work for you for some separation period and then come back to work for you, and it's not 120 days, clock starts again.
Right.
But
so
you're, right, the roster is intended to address that problem.
Absolutely.
The ongoing roster, so.
So from an enforcement standpoint, how are we going to know, how are we going to obtain a roster? What's our mechanism here?
To get your liquor license, you have to give us a roster.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, someone hires someone new, we're
They'd have to
just
amend it.
relying on them to go ahead and update this.
We had some
And I-
discussion about that
Yeah.
in regards to maybe a penalty provision to that, but it was, in our discussions, it was determined that what we really want is voluntary compliance.
Right.
And we're making it a requirement that they have to provide a roster of those individuals that will serve alcoholic liquor on their premise
Right.
to patrons. So for right now, the requirement is going to be an annual requirement.
Sure.
It's a starting point, I
Right.
guess, for us. It's new, and we want to try and see how it works here before being too aggressive,
Sure,
I'd say.
sure.
And
We can always readdress it if we find that we have a problem.
Right, and understand that this is a subset of licensees. It's not for all licensees. It's only for those licensees that serve alcoholic liquor to their patrons on premise.
Right. Got it.
Anybody have any other? This will help us out a lot. Over the last couple of years, we've had some substantial issues that we've come across, and we're just trying to tidy this up. And We've had a couple of our liquor license holders not be so truthful about things, and these are things that will help us do our job a lot better and a little bit more effective. And I would hope that to mimic what Trustee Gavelli said about the shortening up the 120 days, I would love to see that. It makes things easier for us to enforce. And we just want to have everybody on the same page. And it's becoming more and more complex to enforce this. It's becoming more and more expensive to oversee these things. We're having more calls to service, and that takes people off the street. And, coming into the Village Hall for a pre-hearing or a hearing, it costs the village and the taxpayers a lot of money. And that shouldn't be on their backs. So we want voluntary compliance. I believe that we will get voluntary compliance. So we'll hopefully move forward with these changes to better it for the Village of Cary. Nothing else? Thank you, Chief. Next on the agenda is a discussion on the Police Station Village Hall new building project.
Thank you, Mayor. Village Board, as you're aware, we continue to move forward with this project. We had at our Village Board meeting the approval of our construction manager agreement here with Frederick Quinn Corporation. We've been doing a lot of work with FGM, and we had questions early on from a few Village Board members related to a couple items within the interior plan. That would be the Village Hall lobby and the size of that, and then also to the location of where the police command staff offices are. And so starting with the Village Hall lobby, Eric, if you could just pull up the example there. There was some conversations that I've had here and heard from Village Board members about the narrowness of the Village Hall lobby. It's about, I'd say, 8.5 feet, I think, at the narrowest part. The discussion was, is that wide enough? Is it going to be more like a hallway? Should we look to expand that? And so we worked with FGM. They have proposed an option here that would increase the budget by about $170,000 to expand that area around the lobby, provide a little bit more room, obviously, for people to come in and out, but also to have a sitting area within there. So it's a decision point that we need from the Village Board of look to increase the lobby area or keep as is, and that overall impact to the budget would, and these are approximate, would be approximately $170,000. So while you're thinking about that, then the other item that we heard from Village Board members was related to the location of the police command staff offices. So right now in the plan that the board members saw previously, police command staff, and when I say command staff, that is the chief and the 2 deputy chiefs, they were located on the main level. There is interest in looking at, is there a possibility to move those offices to the lower level of the building? So we worked with FGM in this and a couple of concepts that are before you here that are both at an increased cost, not initially as much as I expected them to be. But the first option that we have here is to move investigations. So our detectives, there's a cube of 4 detectives, they would be moved to the main level, and then one of the deputy chiefs would be moved to the lower level. That was an increase of $220,000 to the budget. The second option was moving all of the command staff, so it would be the chief and the 2 deputy chiefs to the lower level, and that would be an increase to the budget, again, approximately $190,000. Both of those options are not recommended by village staff and also not recommended by our architect, FGM Architects. We do recommend that we stay with the original concept that we have before you here. Eric, you could go back to the main level where you have the command staff located on the main level near where the records section is and within one cohesive unit. So we can go back to the lobby discussion and start there. And I'd like to get any feedback that the Village Board has. Again, I just want to remind you to keep our project going. We're on a very aggressive schedule. Here, we want to make sure that we're making efficient use of our taxpayer dollars. We do need direction from the board tonight on these 2 items to make sure we keep the project on schedule.
Any comments?
A question for the first one for the lobby. What space are we losing by expanding it? And what is the cost? I know the cost is, but why is that cost that?
We would be moving out. So Eric, if you could just move the cursor up, and again, this is approximate, but you'd see a
Forward of the
bump.
building.
Yes,
Bump
you
outside
would
the
see
front
a
of the building.
bump out there, and that is a cost, $170,000.
Okay,
Again,
so it's bumping out.
approximately to provide some more space within that lobby area. And we do,
Yeah.
I think I failed to mention, that is recommended by village staff and also FGM architects to provide a little bit more of an area there for seating, and it's not such a hallway corridor for your lobby area.
And we'll add that that was part of the original concept that FGM had proposed, but in the, with the direction of staff to keep the budget and within the budget as efficiently as possible, that was one of the first things they adjusted. So it is something that we could move back towards with the bump out. It wouldn't be the full width of the building, but it'd be an extension to be determined whether it's centered in the building or offset. But it would give that general 16-foot depth for most of that lobby.
Yeah.
I mean, do you typically have a lot of people waiting in the lobby for periods of time?
Not typically. I would say the biggest flexibility this gives you is that any furniture for chairs and things like that that are in the lobby, I would say are not going to be within that same 8.5-foot footprint. With the bump out, you have the opportunity to move that furniture off to the side.
It generally, yeah, there's people don't spend a lot of time.
Yeah, that would be
within the
my guess.
lobby.
If they're coming in, they're getting serviced.
They do.
Or they're meeting with somebody and being brought somewhere else. So
They do their business pretty quick, I would say, for the most part.
I'd rather see us save the $170,000 on this one.
So you're not in agreement with that, Trustee Belli? Trustee Betts?
Or are there other questions from the board related to the lobby before we ask for direction on this?
I would just say that I'm relying on the experts that we hired. I don't build these things, I don't design them. And if they originally proposed this and then are proposing and recommending that, I don't want people to feel like they're cramped coming into Village Hall either, because I think that you are going to have developers, you're going to have business people, someone brand new coming in. I want to be very conscious of how we're spending money, but I also want to look at the big picture. This is a long-term building. This is not a short-term development. It's a big development. So I rely a little bit, I'm leaning towards the recommendation of both the village staff and the architects on this, because I feel that they're more of an expert than I am on it.
Does anybody else have any comments? And I could just kind of get a consensus. Trustee Betts, which way are you leaning?
I don't know. I don't want to spend the money, but yet I think that it would give us more space for people to sit and to come in and so.
Is this one of the only public spaces is when you walk in generally? correct?
This is the only public space.
Well, this is the village hall, so you enter in the main vestibule area, and you'd have the option, either you go to the village hall side where you have community development, admin, finance, or you'd go to, I guess, the left, and that's where your police lobby would be, or straight ahead, and the third choice is straight ahead when we're having village board meetings, or, for example, if there's a police training function that is occurring there. So those areas are generally where the public will be.
We currently don't have people sitting upstairs, though. I mean, they come in, they do their business, they move to where they need to go to, or they do their business and then they leave. So I'm fine with the original concept.
How wide is it currently up there?
Upstairs right now?
What do we have right now when someone comes in, roughly how, you're saying 8.5 feet, how wide is it now? Any idea?
I do not know
Okay.
existing.
If you
We
give
could
me, I'm
guess.
going to go count the tiles and be right back.
I was just kind of
Why don't you-
curious,
why don't
from a
you go
visual
do that?
standpoint, it's very hard when someone tells me 8 feet. I'm trying to visualize, guess I could lay down if I'm 5 feet and add, get another 3 feet on me to get an idea. But when you get a chair there and you get someone coming in, I don't want it to look cramped either, but.
I would just add to, while Eric's going up and counting for us here, is that we have a lean and a tight budget. And I understand both sides of this, but and I've told many board members here, I can't guarantee what the outside's going to look like, the exterior is going to look like. The more that we spend on the interior, that's going to take away from what we may be able to spend on the exterior. So they're all important decisions for you to think about of what is the priorities. We aren't going to be able to do everything. I know there's some things that, the chief may want to do. There's some things that Eric may want to do. There's some things that I want to do, the board wants to do, and we're just not going to be able to do them all. And we think it's an important decision point here to get from the village board. So what do you got?
It's a curved room, so it made it fun. But generally, on average, the main part of the lobby, where the counter is located, it's about 16 feet, ironically deep. At its narrowest, so the corridor before the doorway, you come down the stairway and towards the employee area is about 8 feet. So
That's very narrow. When you're
That's why
coming
we
right
sent
into that
them
area
here.
where you're saying where the stuff is displayed, right? Where we have new projects displayed, that little area there you're saying is about 8 feet? And that's what this is?
that's correct.
I don't see how you fit chairs in there and have people being able to move in there comfortably.
Why do we need chairs in there, though?
That's what, I don't know.
The occasions when people are early for a meeting that's arranged with staff, and sometimes the conference rooms are being utilized before their appointment is set, they will sit there occasionally in those chairs. Not always, but that'd be the
We don't
main
have chairs
use.
upstairs now.
We do.
We do.
Oh.
They got
They got
They might
moved to the
not
other
be
room.
there because we had a meeting in the front conference room. We need
Oh.
to pull in
We
But
still make-
typically
some
we
extra
do.
chairs, so they might not be up there right now.
Well, we're kind of bouncing back and forth. Chris, where were you at?
Well, thinking about exterior, if you look at right now, the front of it's just a blank wall. We won't have a lot of money for the exterior. If we bumped it out now, it at least gives you some dimensional to look a little bit better. So I say bump it out.
I'll ask the question again. How big is the bump out square footage wise for this $170,000?
It would get, and again, this is approximately 16 feet
Is there room?
with perspective.
Is there
Eric, is
room to
that
go
correct?
back and shrink it? I know what you're saying by the bump out and more appealing when you walk up to something like that instead of a 8-foot corridor going in, instead of going the whole 16-foot. Most of this cost in construction is going to be foundation and stuff, which is going outside the building. So if you shrunk that in half, still had the corridor, but opened up smaller area in the front, is there room to do that? Did they look at that?
The 170,000 is it's about 8 feet deep and by about 48 feet long.
Long, right. So I'm saying 20 feet long by 8 feet. Does it cut you down that much? or-
It would not cover the majority of this main lobby area, so the majority of it would still fill the same
Hallway-ish.
narrow depth as the original plan. So my recommendation would be that if you're looking for that extra
You don't
depth,
for the whole thing.
FGM has done a good job of giving us the minimum amount needed to get the effect. Any smaller, you might find that it wasn't worth even the reduced dollars.
Yeah, and I'd like them to be able to, and it's why we have approximate in here, because I'd like to allow them to use their creativity as well, both FGM and Frederick Quinn, in working with us of how exactly it's going to be positioned there. We don't know yet, and that'll be fleshed out. It's more just, is the board interested in spending a little bit of extra money on the lobby here to make it a little bit, I would say, more inviting when people come in?
One
So
thing.
where are you with the, go ahead.
One other small detail, if the direction was to maintain the original concept without probably a large or maybe any cost implication, this vestibule area, right now it's internal to the building, could be a small part outside. So it's not a foundation change, it's more of a slab with a smaller projection.
Yeah.
That vestibule could be outside the building so that there's a door to the police lobby and a separate door to the main lobby. And then these two interior walls could be eliminated. So instead of having two separate hallways, you would have more of an open L shape. I mean, like an open concept in a home. That would help a little bit with the feel, but it's still going to have the same long, narrow effect But there's some minor adjustments that would maybe get rid of that flat, boxy feel that will be part of the next schematic design phase to address Trustee Betts' concerns about the appearance in the front.
So could, I mean, without spending money, is before we get to this, is there a way to look at kind of a little bit bigger, or this full size and the cost breakdown of it, or no?
Well, they could, but again, this is going to impact our project's
Timeline.
The timeline.
project schedule, and it could impact how much we're paying. So
I'm at the point where I'd love to see it bigger, but I'm not so sure $170,000 is worth the expenditure in whole.
So yes or no?
Yeah.
Well, I'll come, yes,
Yes, for bigger,
okay.
maybe it costs somewhere else. It's a lot of cost.
Trustee Kraus was a no, Trustee McAlpine?
I'm a yes, and I think I'm looking at the big picture. We're spending $10 million on a building, and I want to be very conscious of what we're spending money on, but I think that that's the first thing people are going to see as they come in. And I don't want them to feel claustrophobic if they're coming into I think it's very narrow up there if you go and walk in there in that one area. So I'm for the recommendation by staff and architects.
Trustee Weinhammer?
I mean, I feel that most of the board is torn, and I'm feeling torn as well. I feel, is it a need or a want? It's definitely a want, but at the same time, as Ellen was saying, this is a huge project, and we're looking for the longevity, and this is going to be here for however many years. I'd like to do it the right way, and in my mind, the right way, even with spending a little bit more money, would be to have a lobby that isn't so constraint with 8 feet. So
You'll support that?
I will, but I'm not happy about the spending, but I think for the long-term purposes, I think that's the way we should go.
I agree with we go back and forth on some of these things. I deal with facilities every day. It's what I do for a living. When I counsel and work with people that are expanding or reducing, you can't be short-sighted on some of these things. I was excited when we first saw the first plan, and it was a much larger presence. We're building a building that's going to be very tight as it is. And we want to make sure that we're presenting the Village of Cary in the right way, that people feel confident and comfortable in their building. I think the addition to the lobby would make a great deal of, would be a remarkable feature of the building. And to Trustee Kraus, I have people coming in to see me all the time at Village Hall, and I go greet them in Village Hall, and they're always sitting in a chair waiting for me to come and get them. So there is a place for people to congregate. You look at sometimes we have some very large village board meetings. I've been here before when the entire upstairs lobby is full, packed with people, and we have to give people an opportunity to be in the Village Hall. So I will agree with the majority of the board that wants to move forward with that. So your direction is to increase the lobby. Moving on to the command staff, were there any other comments regarding the command staff movement from either the three options that are, well, there's three options to pick from.
I'm the one that asked for this. I felt it was important that the police chief and deputy chiefs were with police personnel. I think it's important, sets a culture for the department, which, again, you look at longevity and what we're trying to achieve. I feel that it's very important, especially for retention. So I feel this is a worthy expense, but looks like it's not being recommended, even though FGM, when they stood up here at the committee of the whole, they did say ideally they would like to do something like that because they understand millennials like to connect with their command personnel. And I think during the workday, I work in a similar setting, Village Hall upstairs, police department downstairs, and very rarely do I get into the upstairs part of the building. So if I were upstairs all day long, I wouldn't have those chance encounters with employees every day. And I think it's important just to ask, how was your weekend? I think that people care about that stuff. So I feel like this is a good move to move them downstairs with the rest of the personnel.
So I'll take that as a yes.
A yes for the relocation?
Mhm.
Yes.
Which one? Option 1 or 2?
Option 2.
2?
Yeah, because option 1 still kept some up there.
So again, option 1 is moving investigations upstairs. And option 2 is moving all command staff downstairs.
And keeping investigations down.
Yeah, so with option
Yeah,
2,
Correct.
records would remain upstairs.
Can you show us the layout, please?
So this is the investigations cluster of
So
the
with-
4 cubicles.
so where-
With option,
Should I
so
talk
with,
about this
with,
instead of me?
with option 1, so investigations would move to the main level.
Right.
And then we'd move one of the DCs downstairs. Now, this is still fluid with FGM, but when we had a call with them to talk through this, it would cantilever part of the building, the upstairs, because if you look at this cube, this complex here, you can't just make an even switch at all. And so that is why there's a budget impact of approximately $220,000. The option 2 then is you're moving the whole suite. So if you go back to the main floor, you're moving the whole suite of the chief and the DCs downstairs. So with that, there's an increase in the size of the lower level, the downstairs. And again, this was just looked at conceptually. They were looking over in the area where the cursor is and reconfiguring some of that area.
Bump out of the building.
And it would be a bump out of the building,
What
correct?
about like the IT server room that's listed on here? Is that something that can be moved upstairs in place of that? So there's no bump outs?
They looked at all kinds of different options, and I know that this was the one that they had recommended. The challenge with moving IT server room or those areas, you're moving space up to an area that is a prime office, corner office for where the chief is and the DCs, and utilizing that for IT or a server room isn't the ideal layout for the building. Plus, it's just the space. You have more that you're trying to move downstairs. There's not as much room. So we looked at it in length. We took both of these comments, the lobby and also the location of the command staff, seriously and vetted it and took a fair amount of time in talking through this with FGM. And I commend them with doing the work here to provide the board these options. So
So you have, like, it looks like it says, I think it says patrol storage there, below the IT? Is that what that says? Like even a storage room that people don't maybe get access to maybe once a day, if that. I mean, to me, in a corner area of a building, makes more sense to have something that storage, IT.
I think IT is located there also because of the access or the proximity to power. And all your utility coming into the building is coming into the upper left-hand corner of the building. So I think that's why that's there as well.
Electrical?
Yeah. Yeah. The lower level, that darker shaded area is going to be all your utilities coming into the building.
And those have to be on the lower level?
I think that, yeah. Yeah, there's going to be a generator outside on a pad adjacent to that as well.
if we go up to the main level, please. So you can see on the edges there how which makes sense around the entire perimeter of the building is we're concentrating on offices, meeting rooms. Those are the prime break room. Those are the prime locations. I mean, we have to have a stairwell in because people have to get from the bottom to the top, and the boardrooms in the center. So there's a very efficient use of the space in both the main level and also the lower level. In looking at this, yeah, there's an increase in the budget, and we do think that this concept makes the most sense for the village of Cary now and in the future.
Just a couple other things to consider when we're talking about this decision is, number one, how it impacts the public. If they're coming into records will be isolated now. They'll be upstairs away from the majority of the workforce, number one. And number two, if anyone's coming down to talk to chief or deputy chief, they have to come through a secure area of the building. We have to escort them down unless they're talking to them up upstairs where they might have an interview room that's going to serve a couple of purposes in regards to meeting people, number one. Number two, I agree with Trustee Cavelli that the workforce is changing in regards to their desires and the way that command staff interacts with them. I think that some things haven't changed, though, from when I was a sergeant, and then as I've progressed through my career. And I believe that there is a desire sometimes for the patrol staff not to necessarily see the chief unless they want to see the chief. They'll find me if they want to find me. They do it now. I've also been a believer in praising in public and reprimanding in private. And if you put the command staff down in the corner, that's going to be adjacent in our current conceptual plan to our roll call room and then the sergeant's suite, that there will be no secrets in regards to someone coming in and being called into the chief's or deputy chief's office. And I think that there's some benefit to having that ability to segregate some activities. And I think what we're really talking about here is a philosophical issue. It's how we manage the department, and my style is more to walk around and not to stay in my office. I go and encounter our personnel on a pretty routine basis, but they're mostly outside the building unless they're coming in to eat or they're meeting a complainant in the lobby or things of that nature. And by the way, they're going to be meeting those complainants in the lobby upstairs. So all those things considered, plus I sat down and spoke to the individuals that were going to be directly impacted with this decision, and that was the two deputy chiefs. And they were both adamant that they stay together because they collaborate. So they have that configuration now, although it's not the best layout in our current facility, but they wanted to maintain the ability to be able to collaborate in regards to the operations of the department. If we move the investigations upstairs, there's a cost, benefit and liability, because I like the ability of investigations to interact with patrol. But if you move them upstairs, then they become segregated if that's the option that we choose. And then the concept of the millennial workforce particularly, right? That's what we're really talking about, because from my maturation into my career, there was one time where it was more related to the command staff spoke to our workforce, where now it's a more desire to speak with, and that's why FGM suggested the roll call configuration that they have. That's more of a table and chairs and sitting around a common table versus having more of a roll call situation that we have currently, where it's set up more like a classroom, where there's kind of a information that's more one way than two way. But in discussing this, when one of the deputy chiefs, we said, okay, we'll move one downstairs because your charges are generally patrol, and then move the investigators or detectives upstairs because the support services deputy chief's responsible for their, supervision. One of the options was just to move the deputy chief, and he was okay with that so long as he stayed upstairs. That was his desire. So I can tell you that I think this is more of a philosophical issue. I think that it's more related to how we manage the department, not necessarily that a design of a building is going to help or hurt the way that we manage the department. I understand adjacencies, and all adjacencies and all designs have pros and cons. So that's what I would say in regards to the way we looked at it in terms of the changes in the floor plan that was originally submitted by FGM.
Well, and one of the things I asked was if there's another agency, whether it be similar size or close to, if they have a similar design to this, how it works for them. And so I'd still be interested in knowing that, if we can reach out to them. If not, I'm happy to reach out to them to see if
I worked in one like that. And we had our administration investigations there when it existed, records and communications upstairs, and patrol and traffic were downstairs.
And I would just be curious, because I do know some people there, to reach out to them and just say, do you like this? Would you redo this? We're spending $10 million. I just want to make sure we're doing it right and it's for the long haul. And this is, listen, I don't want to spend the money to even do this, but I actually feel that strongly about it, that if I had to choose between a hallway where people may sit for a couple minutes versus having your command staff with its people, to me, that's a no-brainer.
Trustee Betts, where do you stand? Is there an option that you go for?
I'm going to stay with the chief, and I say
Option
No.
3?
no change.
Trustee Collier?
Option 3 for me.
Trustee Kraus?
I'd be interested to hear what Trustee Covelli might find out, but I'll allude to what the chief is presenting and recommending.
Could I ask a question? Could I, on the design, when they're going to make the lobby bigger, with the ground that is over there, it's going to end up being a full basement dig anyway. What are you going to do with the extra space in the basement? You're making a foundation for the lobby bigger, and it's not going to be a 4-foot wall because it's gravel and sand in that area, so it'll end up probably be an 8-foot wall anyway. So you can add more space to the basement area through the lobby addition too.
I'd defer to Eric.
Conceptually, with our architect, it would be on slab for
Yeah.
8-foot addition, and the full foundation would be the same footprint that you see here, again, for the cost efficiencies of construction than having a bump out of a foundation. That's why it's only $170,000 and not more.
And that's why we have the construction manager on staff too, to help make sure that how it's being designed can actually be built, so.
Just my practice in digging in that area, that end up with a full 8-foot basement anyway, that you can't dig a little 4-foot area that close to the foundation. Now they have another 4 feet of concrete, isn't that much more to gain extra space. You're gaining it upstairs, and it's gaining it downstairs too, down to waste and space. It's gotta be filled back in with pea gravel, put the slab back onto it. Cost factors, and what I've done in the past and done a lot of these projects, is that it's just that we've all going with a full 8-foot wall and a 4-foot wall, and have it fill all back in with pea gravel. Just you gain more space on it too.
Thank you. Trustee McAlpine?
I would say, number one, I understand completely what Kim is mentioning and her concerns and her passion for that. I'm a firm believer that it is philosophy versus functionality, and the culture of any department or any business is by its leaders. So you could have everybody on the same floor, and if you don't have a leadership style where someone's interacting with their employees, you would be faced with the same type of dynamics, the same type of problems. So I think that our management and leadership style, when they did this, it was correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a needs analysis done. People were interviewed, not just the chief, but other commands. People were interviewed when everyone came up with this original plan. And they did look at these things. I think that having roll call now that we're gonna be able to have people together, you have a totally different environment from interaction standpoint. And I think that can be met. So I'm going to stick with option 3, which is what the chief is for and village staff and the architects are for.
Trustee Weinhammer?
I do defer to Trustee Covelli with regard to, and the chief, with regard to police questions, just because I have no idea about that kind of stuff. I understand where she's coming from, and I understand where the chief is coming from. Do you have enough to go with option 3? Does it even matter what I say?
We do. It would be 5. But I would love to hear your opinion.
I am very torn on it. So
I know,
just
we
go
talked
with,
a lot about it yesterday, so I
Yeah.
understand.
We can proceed.
We can proceed with that.
Doesn't matter,
I understand where you're coming from. Thank you. All right, Eric, you have your direction to go with option 3 as it's been presented.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. This project it's just be prepared. It's going to be moving fast, and village staff, we're going to be making a lot of decisions. We're going to be coming back here, I think, at one of our upcoming board meetings to provide some feedback from our architect and Frederick Quinn. But we've got a very aggressive schedule. We want to make sure that we stay on that schedule to, again, make efficient use of our taxpayer dollars. So thank you.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are no names. Thank you. We're adjourned at
Thank you.
7:12.
Okay, so where are we in between? You have 7.